Hey everyone, welcome to episode 93 of The Green Life. In today's episode, we're going to talk about lifestyle medicine, reversing disease, understanding our why so that we can make sustainable changes to improve our health with Dr. Laurie Marbas. Dr. Marbas has been a family physician for over 20 years, changing lives by learning about lifestyle medicine, implementing it in her own life to now really diving deeper into a more mindful approach that goes way beyond our diet and lifestyle. So I'm very excited about having this conversation with Dr. Marbas, but in the meantime, we're going to give a big shout out to Nama Well for the J2 juicer and the C2, which includes a powerful blender. So if you want to change any of the machines in your kitchen and consolidate, I will really look at this. I have a 10% discount for you in the show notes. I'm not an affiliate as such, I don't make money out of this, but it's for you to use if you wish. However, I do get support if you buy products from my links at Dr. Morse's Herbs, New Zest, and Wunder Workshop, and I really appreciate the support because the channel can keep on growing. So please use the discount, the links, and help us out. Always happy to get some support. If you need support also in how to use these products, you can work with me. I put my links to my work below, so don't be afraid of getting in touch. All right, without further ado, let's get into this beautiful episode with our guest. Welcome, Dr. Laurie Marbas. Hi, Dr. Marbas. Thank you so much for joining us on The Green Life today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. So you do amazing work as a
Oh,
lifestyle medical practitioner. And I know people have heard about you and they've seen you. You've been popping up in many courses and online. You're doing a wonderful daily broadcast on Instagram to talk about health. And I love how you encompass a very holistic view of health that is not just about being an MD and prescribing medication, but actually looking at how to change our lifestyle and how to look at diet. And of course, you embrace the plant-based approach, which is wonderful. And so if people don't know you or haven't come across you yet, can we just give them a little bit of a background, how you got into medicine, what inspired you, but also how you transitioned from being an MD that studied in the system that pushes pharmaceuticals and decided that lifestyle medicine was your way?
oh boy. So if we want to peel back, look back in the story of where I got to where I am now. When I was 10, my sister was very ill, and she was 4 at the time and had recurring fevers. And it was interesting as a 10-year-old to look upon a situation and not quite understand what was going on, feel helpless and feel sorry, and just the dynamics of the family. We didn't have health insurance. We grew up in a home that was by, struggled financially. And so there wasn't a lot of doctor visits. And so where we did go, I think the care was subpar from what I would consider better quality care now. They would just say, oh, it's normal for, when she was sick, when she was 2, to have high fever. And, again, my parents being medically illiterate in the sense of understanding what was causing fevers and such, they really struggled. And so we finally were referred to a urologist in Clovis, New Mexico. It's a little tiny town. And they did surgery on my sister, and she got better. And I remember sitting in this hospital and seeing and remembering the evolution of my sister going from being ill to well, in the sense of going from a sickly child to a typical annoying little sister. I was like, I really want to be a part of that and provide healing and understand how I can help alleviate the suffering, right, that we see in this world. And, fast forward to college and got married. I had 3 children. I went to medical school. They were 5, 3, and 10 months. Now my daughter is a doctor. All my kids, she'll be almost 30. She's almost 30. Oh my heavens. So you look all of that time, I was active duty in the military. And I think, through just being a parent and going through medical school and then active duty, you see a lot of different things. You see, from, and being a family medicine physician, you see all sorts of stuff. But at the end of the day, you see disease that doesn't get better with pharmaceuticals in the sense of chronic disease. We manage subpar. Again, I think we can see some improvement, and it doesn't mean that I don't agree with the Western philosophy of medications are needed. They're absolutely amazing. It's a miracle that, antibiotics, and when people are acutely ill, surgery and trauma and all the amazing things that have really allowed our species to advance, to live, even in the sickness that we have, to a degree, live longer. And so anyway, what happened was I left the military. We decided to live in Colorado, kind of rural Colorado, up in the mountains, in the Rocky Mountains. And we loved the nature and was very enjoying that time. And I had a patient come up to me one day and said, Dr. Marbas, meat and dairy upset my stomach. I said, well, stop eating meat and dairy. Understanding subconsciously there was other foods she could be eating, but it didn't dawn on me that that's a plant-based diet until she came back in 30 days and brought her daughter with her and made her miss school actually to come see me. What was interesting, my mind immediately created a story of, well, why would my patient bring her teenage daughter with her to her appointment other than there's some intervention that I need to take? But instead, what it was a moment of enlightenment, which is, I think, a really kind of critical point in my story here, is that as physicians, we're always looking at what we need to do, and people are coming to us and we have to fix things, versus looking at it this as a partnership, and we work with the patient and understanding that, allow the patient space to share what is going on in their lives. And I think what was an interesting piece of that was bringing the daughter with her really was such a shock to my normal routine of thinking and reacting like a cog in a wheel, that it really got my attention. And I'm so thankful that she did that, because what her daughter proceeded to tell me was that she felt she was helping her mother with the eating, because we lived in this very small rural town. We had a Walmart, which is like a big, grocery store chain here, and another smaller grocery store. So there was no vegan restaurants 12 years ago. And in Rifle, Colorado, anyway, named after a gun. And I'll let you make those conclusions. But the thing was, she goes, I was helping my mom and I started eating this food and I felt so good. I stopped both my attention deficit disorder medications and I feel very good. And I was like, huh. And her mom goes, yeah, why was she able to do that? And I was like, I don't know, but that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. Let's talk. And like, what were you eating? And it's kind of like a dimmer switch that goes off on your head. It's like that light switch. You just, it's like, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter. Like there's this little flicker and then it just gets brighter and it's like, it's fully illuminated. Or a door's, you're peeking through the keyhole and then the door is cracking open and then you walk through the door and you're like, oh, it's like, wow, okay, holy moly, there's a lot here I don't understand about life and about medicine in the body. And I immediately Googled after that appointment. I was like, ADD, plant-based diet. The China study came up. I ordered it off Amazon, mailed to me. I read it in like 2 days and was astounded at the possibilities. And I think it was a great lesson also in understanding that there's so much more that we will probably never understand about, one, just the human body, or nature in general, because we really try to create definitions and facts. The truth will always be evolving in that sense. I don't think we'll ever have a handle on because it's always changing, right? But anyway, so I started down the rabbit hole and I have yet to emerge. And it led to a shift in my own family's dietary changes. 2 weeks later, I was reading more. I was trying to figure out how to do this myself because I really wanted to be a model of what I was expressing. I have a very strong conviction, like I cannot speak something differently than I'm doing.
Mm.
Like it just doesn't work with me. I don't sleep well when I do that. My values and my presentation, I try to be very transparent, and I just find it a much easier way to live life, whether it's people
Okay.
deem it good or bad, that's fine. That's not my worry. So what was happening was at home, I was like, what am I going to do? But
Mhm.
this patient came, as Providence will have it, serendipity, whatever you want to call it, a lupus patient, and she was very ill. She was on 12 different medications, 50 pounds overweight. She had been diagnosed with lupus a couple of years earlier. She was in chronic pain, having headaches most days of the week. Her inflammatory markers were very high, even on high doses of prednisone and other medications to suppress the immune system. And as she's
Mm.
telling me one day she came to see me that she was not even going to be able to continue working. And she was younger than me at this point, which was really quite phenomenal. I mean, she was in her late 30s. I was in my early 40s at that time. And um, she goes, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to keep working. And, she had family to provide for and things to do. And it was, I mean, I can't even imagine when you're physically ill, then you're not going to be able to, provide financially. I mean, the amount of burden that was just lying because of this disease, right? So my mind, however, as she's speaking, I couldn't help think back to this patient and everything I've been learning. I was like, okay, anti-inflammation, anti-inflammation, we need to talk about changing her diet. And so this was kind of my first intervention patient. It was my first plant-based prescription, so to speak. And I was like, okay, I don't think there's many meds we can change right now, but how about we change what's on the end of your fork? And I mentioned to her, you know, all the things that I'd been reading, the patient before, how she felt better. And I was like, I can't help but think this won't help. And she was like, I'm willing to try anything. And so she was at a place where the suffering had become so profound that she was willing to take a leap of faith into something that I couldn't say for certain would help her. And which I think a lot of patients do every day, right? We take medications and we prescribe medications, and we regurgitate the literature that we're told, but we truly don't know what the full consequences of these medications are going to be. In some cases, they're absolutely life-saving. Other times, they cause more problems than they solve. And so I think we need to be very detached from the outcome when we see that. But anyway, so she took it upon herself to do this, and I didn't even have a lot to tell her what to do. She just ate plants and didn't eat animals. And we measured her inflammatory markers before she left. It was called CRP. It was 3 times high normal, so 300% times the high normal. She came back in 14 days. It had dropped 300%.
Wow.
She had lost 8 pounds. Her headaches were resolved. Fast forward 5 months, 50 pounds later, 7 to 12 medications, including the prednisone. And she went on to do quite well. But I went home after that 2 week follow up, and I walked in the door and I said, I strongly convicted I'm going on this plant based diet today. And I've kind of started evolving and moving in that direction. And I took a trash can and threw out everything in the home. Now, mind you, at that time, I'm married, still married. Uh, Lord help him. And then I had a 13, 15, and 18-year-old at home. My oldest is my daughter and my 2 boys. And yeah, so I just was like, this is what we're doing. And my husband's like, okay, you still cooking? And I said, yeah. He's like, okay. And he went on to lose 70 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, because when we got married, we were both thin and young, but then over the years, life happens and it just kind of evolved. And then suddenly he's like, whoa, this, I mean, it was a great wake up call for him. He lost it very quickly. And anyway, the kids, my daughter went off to college. I tried to share as much as I could. The boys over time evolved to a plant-based diet. My youngest being more of an ethical vegan. My middle one's just like, it's just a
Oh.
healthy choice. My daughter's now come back around. It's like more for climate, but she's understanding the health consequences as well. My husband continued to be on a plant-based diet with myself. But what was interesting is that was a Friday, and I got rid of everything inside the home. In the garage, there was a quarter of a grass-fed beef. It was a large chunk of meat. You don't just throw that out. I mean, we lived in Colorado. there are large animals that you don't want attracted to anything. And plus there was nowhere to dump it. And I wasn't going to give it to a human. I was like, do I give it to a pet, like a health shelter or something, animal shelter? And what happened was that was Friday. On Sunday, we went to church. We came back home, and the freezer had broke at some point over the weekend. And the stench and the fluids that were emanating, literally coming out of the garage as we walked in, were such an overwhelming come right to like shock to the system. And my husband was like, if you hadn't been with me, I could have sworn you just unplugged the freezer. I was like, no, I'm pretty sure this is, in my mind, God speaking to me and saying, you'll be done. And that was 12 years ago. It's been a wild, fun, crazy, amazing ride. Went on to start a company called Plant-Based Telehealth and sold it. Attempted to start another company called Mora and using insurance, because the system here in the United States is very complicated. It's a struggle for people to pay for certain services, and then we try to use insurance, and I mean it's just a debacle here. It's a quagmire of sorts. But it's a system that we have. We attempted to work in it and found that it wasn't probably the right time or the best time, and it was actually a good thing. I feel that's allowed me to grow in other ways, which is fantastic, right? Things come and go. That's just the way life is. Challenges and change is the one constant we can always agree will be the constant is change. So that's really kind of where I'm at now. So I'm seeing patients. I'm licensed in the United States. You have to be licensed in all 50 states or a state to provide care. I am licensed in all 50 states and DC. So I can see patients via telemedicine, which has been phenomenal. But really, I feel like more recently, I think there's a place that I'm really trying to connect with people on a deeper level and understanding where their true needs are, like why we make the decisions we do, understanding that there's an essence in all human beings, the being part, and connecting to the mindfulness aspect and understanding that if they can connect to that deeper sense of who they really truly are, we make better decisions for ourselves and for others. Anyway, I want to be able to somehow share that message within the context of health, because I think health is a great point of suffering, and it really makes people provides an opportunity for self-reflection and growth if someone allows it, or if they understand it can be, and that the only point they have right now is now to make a change, pull them back from the anxiety that's created about wondering about the future or resonating or trying to hang on to a past, because really those are only alive if we allow them to be in our mind. And that's been really kind of fun, because really that's the only truth I can speak is what can I do this one moment and what can you do? Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at right now, and I'm just enjoying being a part of that journey.
I love it. Thank you. That's such a nice introduction, because it gives the timeline, but also shows the evolution. And I think it shows that we're not, because sometimes, we present ourselves at some point in our life where people get to know us and we become more popular, and they think that it happened overnight, because there's this overnight thing that we have in our head, like overnight success. And it takes years to even build that journey and learn from it. And we're always learning, we're always changing, but it doesn't happen overnight. And there is no judgment for it. Like we learn, and we just like, okay, well, I made mistakes in the past, I'm going to do it better now. So it's such a great way to also find kindness. And I think it ties in very well with the mindfulness, having that grace that sometimes we forget to give ourselves, especially when we want to do things well. And maybe some of us had like A personality, A type personality, like I need to do everything perfect. So we just don't offer kindness and help and grace to ourselves. And then it's like, hi, it's fine. Everybody makes mistakes. Like that's the one, common denominator in everybody's life. And so it's nice to actually hear about this evolution. I think you also mentioned, well, you didn't mention it now, but you were working with an entrepreneur that had a company called Blueberry. Is that correct?
Yeah. So Blueberry went to Mora. So we founded Mora. So after Murti Hussein was also an investor in my first company, plant-based telehealth, which is now Love Life, or Love.life.
Oh, yes.
Then I moved to California, and we started a similar type of thing where we were using group visits to help people transition to not only a plant-based diet, but just understanding lifestyle medicine and what are the actions that need to occur for health to happen. And I think this is really interesting because it makes me think about, you can tell someone, you can advise someone, you can educate someone can read an article and, all right, I'm going to commit to this, but they may do it for 1 week, 2 weeks, and then they fall off, they struggle, right? So we get stuck back in these old habits. And that is, I think, the important thing to be here is, even though you have an offering or we have choices every day, why do we make the choices that we make? And how can we make different choices without using willpower? Because really, willpower at the end of the day is an illusion. And that is the piece that's so powerful, by being present and mindful of. And it's not a doing, it's an allowing, right? And giving space to choices, and not just always reacting, or being present and observing why you're reacting, observing why you're having these thoughts, because these thoughts are not you, right? Your thoughts they're just emanating from an ego, a story, something that we cling to. And if we give ourselves an opportunity to step back and observe what's going on from a non-judgmental, kind, compassionate space, we will make different choices. And sometimes that can be scary because you hang on to a story, you think about, well, what can I do to make this happen? Type A personalities are very good at that. I fully understand and I'm aware how that happens. That's how you kind of grit your way through life. And I'm like, what a real interesting thing to think about life as always a struggle. And if you think of it as a struggle, it will be a struggle. And it doesn't mean that there's not going to be life circumstances that are challenging or difficult, but we can choose to engage with this world in a different manner, and allowing that to evolve in you. Again, it's a journey. I've really found that the best way for me to process everything that always is occurring in the day is just understanding that I have one moment, and the moment started with birth. I'm sure there were moments before that, but the birth, and then that one moment is just ever evolving. I'm not living moment to moment to moment. I'm just literally just have one moment that's always changing. So that moment is different than it was in my memory, of what my earliest memory, when I was 3 or something. But that's the same moment, but it's just evolved. And that's, for me, by thinking that way, I still plan for the future, meaning I set goals, but I'm not emotionally attached to the outcomes, because when the moment arrives, that this moment evolution arrives in, it's going to be always better, because I'm always accepting of what's the facts here. And so, that's how, I'm not sure how that's circumvented back to that question, but that just where that, I just feel it's so an important thing that people are just rooted in the present moment and accepting that. And then they can start seeing and shifting and making things change in their lives to a profound and pretty critical, quickly. I mean, it happens quick when you allow things to do that. So
it does. So this is how the evolution from Blueberry went on to more group coaching. Okay.
Yeah, group visits. I still see patients individually, but I'm really, it'll continue to evolve, and part of me really loves seeing patients, but part of me just feels so strongly that there's such a more important message that needs to be shared about health, so that we can shed the baggage and live a different life, because a healthier human body will occur from that. But it's this mental piece, right? It's such an important aspect that we have to get that right first. Yeah, it's just we just have to get that right. We're missing the mark, I think, from that standpoint. Yeah.
We are, because we're very disconnected. I think you said at the beginning, we are beings, and instead
Mm,
we're looked at just like bodies, and it's just physiology, right? And
mm,
anatomy. And it's not, it's just so much
mm,
more the bigger piece. And um, so actually this ties well into the next question, because I wanted to segue in one of the projects that you work on with our friends, the Campbells. And I know even the co-founder of Blueberry, his mom had diabetes, which it's how he got interested in it. And you are an expert at changing lifestyle to actually reverse diabetes and insulin resistance, which I love. Then you mentioned also the old company actually became I Love Life, which just bought Mastering Diabetes. So I think
mm,
it all comes down to the message, and it's because a lot of people are insulin resistant and they don't even know what that means. And insulin resistance is the common denominator of all types of diabetes if we really think
mm,
about it.
mm,
So in the project from food to freedom, you were actually working with a group and with Nelson and Kim, and it was a residential experiment where people really reversed their diabetes numbers eat like very quickly, and they were not restricting, they were not even eating like a perfect like a restrictive diet where like you totally don't have, it was cooked food, it wasn't raw, it was like very free and liberal, and yet they saw these numbers will improve. And that documentary is so well done also because it brought back the fact that how expensive it is even to healthcare in the US. But even if you have diabetes and you need insulin, it is tough. You don't get full coverage, and a lot of people sometimes can't even afford buying enough. So, understanding how to even use that insulin is really, really important. So, before we get into that, let's go back to insulin resistance. What does it actually mean? And then, if we talk about diabetes, what it means and what the different types of diabetes are.
yeah. So no, absolutely. Insulin resistance is a really fascinating framework to look at a lot of chronic diseases. So first of all, we need to understand what I mean by chronic disease. It's something that lasts, by the definition, more than 3 months, doesn't get better with medications necessarily, like resolve or reverse, like something like an infection, right? Or an injury that you can mend and the body will do its healing and you're better. Chronic disease is manifested to a point where you just manage symptoms with medications. And so insulin resistance is a big piece of that. So all chronic diseases are multifactorial: heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune disease, you name it. And when you look at insulin resistance, at the end of the day, there's several inputs that are occurring here. We can talk about food as a big one. When you eat high saturated products, foods, inflammatory products, typically coming from animal origin, ultra processed foods, things like that, the body is trying to get back to a homeostatic situation. So what it's doing is it's taking the inputs that you're taking and trying to fix things. So, for example, there is a personal fat threshold theory that, let's say someone who eats these foods gains weight, and genetically they're predisposed to a certain amount of fat that can be stored in the subcutaneous under the skin areas, which is where we're meant to store fat, right? Because we have to have that, because back 100, 500, 600 years ago, we didn't have food, plenty, right? We lived in feast or famine, and now we live in chronic feast. And the body wasn't needed a place to store calories that we could utilize during the famine. Well, genetics will predispose when those stores get used up, right? So when that happens, now we start storing fat in other places. We call it visceral fat and ectopic fat. So what do I mean by that? So visceral fat is basically when the fat is being stored around your internal organs, your heart, your liver, your intestines, all this inside the thorax, the abdominal area. This is a very different type of fat. We need to think about subcutaneous fat, the fat under skin, as an organ. It has receptors, it has a blood supply, it releases hormones. So it's just another part of the body. It's not just this thing, right? We try to compartmentalize our body, but it's a system. It's a beautiful system when we allow it to work. And so then the body's like, okay, I got to store this fat somewhere. I'm going to store it in this visceral fat. And that includes the liver. Then the ectopic fat, which is, that liver is stored within the liver and in muscles. So now we have the beginnings of insulin resistance because that fat storage is inflammatory and it's changing the dynamic of how the body can actually work, right? There's hormones involved. So it's not even outside the food. So it's the weight gain, but it's also stress, right? Stress causes more certain hormones to feed into the insulin resistance. It's different hunger hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, your sympathetic nervous system, causing an elevation in your resting heart rate, your high blood pressure, which causes even more issues, your gut microbiome changes, lack of sleep, disrupted sleep patterns. So all of this, right, even insulin resistance is multifactorial. But, just to make it a little bit more simply, is understanding that now, because of the fats and where it's being stored, the body doesn't see and use insulin as well as it should. So you can imagine if you have a door and a keyhole, that the key was insulin and the door was a receptor on the cell surface. I like to think, they say the DNA is the brain of the cell. I actually think it's more along the lines of the receptors, the cell membrane, because that's where all the action occurs, right? So the DNA is more of a repository of like, let's go pull out this, we need this. But what's telling the DNA to open and that we need this? It's all these amazing things on the cell membrane. So I like to think of the cell membrane as this cool, dynamic brain that's making things happen based on all these different inputs. Well, once the fat causes inflammation, it disrupts the ability of the receptors to actually see and utilize the insulin. So the insulin is trying to get in there and work, but it doesn't. So we become insulin resistance. Therefore, the doors can't open to the cells and let the blood sugar in, right? So that's the beginning. You'll see blood sugars rise and it takes years. Some people, it's faster than others. Sometimes, there's some epigenetics involved. So if you like, for example, my grandmother had my mother's eggs were there since literally she was a fetus in my grandmother's body. So part of me was in my mother's body and my grandmother's body. It's just crazy. It's like mind blowing. And so when you think of it that way, so there's generational occurrences, right? We're turning on genes. So I was affected by what my grandmother ate, which obviously affected what I was also affected by what my mother ate, which then affected my daughter because my daughter's egg was, and my sons were eggs, part of them inside of me when my mother was pregnant. I mean, just imagine, anyway, little mind blowing emoji. So anyway, the insulin resistance piece, that's what happens. And that's the important thing is understand that it affects all organ systems. It's not just, my glucose metabolism. We're talking about all sorts of things. It can cause high blood pressure, it can increase risk for cancers, all sorts of stuff, cholesterol, you name it. So that is the insulin. And then I believe your second question was the different types of diabetes. So this insulin resistance piece can play a part in all diabetes, but it's really a matter of type 2 diabetes, right? Which is this later onset. You start with oral medications, and many times people burn out their pancreas. They need more insulin, so they start injecting insulin. Type 1 and type 1.5, these are, let's start with type 1. These are typically kiddos who getting this, children. It's an autoimmune condition. Many times you'll see genetics, like there may be a sibling that had, or a parent that had type 1 diabetes. There's a set of circumstances. I think that's still evolving in the research, what those environmental cues are that, what tips the threshold, so to speak. And so basically what happens is it's many times tied to an illness. Maybe they had a cold or the flu, and then they evolved into type 1 diabetes. Their pancreas just literally shuts down. Their immune system attacks the pancreas. There's no more production of blood sugar, or of insulin, and they require insulin the rest of their lives. Type 1.5 is an interesting entity. It basically is a later onset and a slower onset of a type 1 type, but it's not as complete a devastating, like they just have a decreased pancreas response to eating glucose or carbohydrate. And so that evolves, and many times they end up using a much smaller amount of insulin. Now, insulin resistance can still occur in type 1s and type 1.5s, right? So they require more insulin than they would if not. But I think, Cyrus and Robbie are great examples of type 1s who are very insulin sensitive. So they use very small amounts of insulin because they're so insulin sensitive, right? They're using what we would describe as physiologic amounts of insulin. It's what a body that doesn't have diabetes would use, and that's what they're injecting. And it's interesting because they can measure it. We have really no way of measuring other than I can measure a C-peptide in your body, which is a prohormone, or the pancreas produces insulin. The body cuts off the C-peptide. The insulin now becomes active. So I can measure C-peptide and tell you if, in this moment in time, how much insulin you're producing. And so that is one way of diagnosing someone with type 1.5 or 1, along with antibodies. But there's lots of others. There's MODY types, there's genetic types, there's gestational, which is more of an insulin resistance leading to type 2. So it's a really interesting and fascinating situation. But all I do know is eating a whole food plant-based diet, being mindful of your lifestyle choices improves everything. Maybe not fully resolved, maybe not full remission, but will put you in the best state of health that we can be at this moment.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'd reverse type 2 diabetes myself.
Awesome.
So, I went very much the route that Robbie and Cyrus share with their work. I mean, I did the fruit and it was perfect. My body doesn't love to be just on fruit personally. Not so much that I have, I had spikes. I mean, I checked with the CGM, but it's more, and for me, rolling ranges are fine. You eat and you're gonna see the sugar go up. That's normal. It's gonna come down again. Like that is the ability of the body to do what it needs to do. But it was more that after a while, after I reached a certain threshold, I just realized that actually eating too much fruit was making me put like belly fat on, and I think hormones have a play in it. And as I got into my 40s, my body was like, yeah, the fruit is great, but don't exaggerate it. Like we can't cope with this. Like rely on the greens, and that seems to just work better for me. So I think understanding your body is really, really key, and understanding how, you mentioned it, it's like also there's a personal approach because we are all slightly either more prone to something or not. And so understanding our epigenetics is very, very, very important. It can help us make better choices as well. And I was wondering if you have kept in touch maybe with the members or the people that took part in From Food to Freedom, because you were obviously there as the in-house doctor, and you were measuring their their vitals and making sure that they were okay, that their sugars was not too high, that their blood pressure was fine, and so that they could also see, obviously have numbers to see. And one of the people in that group was quite young. He was at university, I believe. So
yeah, he's 18.
yeah, he's 18, right? So I was wondering if you kept in touch with them and if they stuck to the diet, and if you've seen then a progression, because you say sometimes we can resolve it completely, some other times we can't, depending how far along we are with that. And I'd like to have an update if you have any.
Yeah, so this was back in, let's see here, this would have been 2021. So I actually had my 51st birthday when we were filming, was there. And so the participants, there were 8. We lived in this one large home in North Carolina for 10 days. They filmed us. And they had not been on a whole food plant-based diet. We had wide-ranging ages, like you said, 18 to mid-70s. Some had type 2 diabetes a few years, others for a decade plus. Wide range of medications, but 6 of them were on insulin. The other 2 were spouses of the participants. They didn't have diabetes, but they had high cholesterol and wanted to lose some weight. And one of the wives had been more plant-based than the others. So anyway, during that 10 days, 4 of them came off the insulin 100%.
Wow.
One of them within 24 hours. One of them actually stopped, was it 9 or 10 medications within 24 hours.
Wow.
The others reduced by 75, 95%. Now, what was interesting afterwards, I followed up, and kept in touch with them. But 4 of them more so than the others. These are the 4 that actually kept really strictly to the diet and had amazing results. Even 6 months later, you can see that in the documentary because they go back and interview. It's like, hey, how are you doing? So the 4 that I interacted with, but these were it wasn't anything I did. They had already shifted, even in our conversations during, the filming that were not necessarily recorded and put in the documentary, but just our personal conversations, because I'm literally living with these people and having amazing conversations. There is definitely some internal shift, right? Like there is a different mindset. They believed that they were going to get well. They already saw it. They already grasped that concept that this could happen. Now, the other 4 were still struggling, right? You can see the structure, the friction, the tension, and they were already like, well, when I get home, this is what's going to happen. So they're already self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So they're already predicting what that future is going to be, even though the future hadn't happened yet. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about my evolution of, wow, I really want to help this piece, right? The mind, what's going on between the ears, because this really is the crux of the issue. It's not even the diet, anything. It's like, if you don't have the mindset correct, no matter what I tell you, it doesn't matter what I feed you, you're not going to get better, or at least to the degree that you could. Anyway, and that's very well reflected in the documentary. And that's what's so fun about it. Not fun. It's sad that the folks didn't embrace it, but they go back to their story. They stick back to the story that they've created for themselves. They're a victim of the disease. They identify as a type 2, so they must stay as a type 2. And I know that probably may make some people very angry by me stating that. That is just the fact. And I've seen it play over and over and over again. I've been a doctor for 2 decades. I have seen thousands and thousands of patients, and it is a very clear path that I've seen now. And when someone understands that, they realize that they can make different choices, but they have to come from a different place, not of a willpower, but as a belief in knowing who they are. And their health is just a reflection of that. Because when you understand who you truly are, you make different choices. It's just it's a different being. It's a different place that you find strength to make choices and deal with the life circumstances and what presents you in opportunities. And things shift for people anyway. So, but that is really it. The 4 are doing fabulous, improved kidney disease, cholesterol dropping, reversing the type 2 diabetes, more energy, just a whole new path of wellness in front of them, whatever life, is left in their time here on earth. The other 4 fell back into patterns. Their social structure, even though some had better financial social structures, they made the excuse of, well, my friends are eating this way. How can I not eat like my friends? Why can't you eat different than your friends? Right. So the other was, I can't afford it, but you can afford the ultra processed foods that doesn't feed you. You're affording something. You're affording to feed the illness. Right. Now, does it mean that you can't go get organic? And no, but I guarantee you, this is called the pauper's diet for a reason. If you get dried beans and grains, it's just like the cheapest food anywhere. And, the other one was, again, falling to the stress of, I have to be the caregiver and struggles. And, anyway, I'm not saying that's not unfortunate life circumstances, but they fell back to the story. They hadn't changed and evolved out of and come above their lives. They hadn't just decided, I don't have to hold on to this past. I don't have to keep making those same decisions. Wow. Life has afforded me a different choice. I have different knowledge here. And so now if you choose to make different, you have the capacity to make different choices. We all do every single day. And it doesn't even have to be about health. It can be about anything in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when we take that stance, it's amazing how life just changes. You know, the circumstances might be the same, but life has changed. I like to share a story, if it's okay,
Yeah.
a little bit different. So several years ago, back in, I think it was 2017, we were in the Florida Keys. I was living in Florida. My kids had come to visit. We drove down to the Florida Keys and we were going to go snorkeling. And I'm a decent swimmer, but it was December and we're on a little boat and it was some pretty good waves. We're going out quite a bit. My husband, enough that he got a little bit like, whoo, a little nauseous, right, from seasickness. We got in the water. Now, my kids were like competitive swimmers. They just went in like little fish, they're like fish. Off they go, right? My husband's same, just went and did the same. So I get in the water and I started having intense anxiety. And I was like on the verge of a panic attack. Now, I've never had a panic attack, but if ever I was going to, I'm assuming that is what that felt like. I was struggling to breathe. I thought I was going to literally implode just from the stress because I was riding these big waves, right? The clouds were gray and it just seemed to be like I couldn't hear anything around me. Like I was just so focused. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I wasn't going to die. So what was interesting was there was some voice in my head that's like, Laurie, you're going to be okay. Go deeper, look under. And so what happened is I put my face in the water and it was so calm and serene and vast. It was like looking at the Grand Canyon, right? And then I was like, huh, well, that's interesting. So the anxiety started to melt. I came back up. I looked at the waves are still there, but I have a different perspective, right? I'm looking at these waves and I'm feeling the waves still, and I'm still going up and down. And it's like, Laurie, look under, go back under, right? So I'm looking back under and suddenly it all washes. And then I'm like, oh, this is incredible. I come back up because I'm like, what is going on? And then I still see the waves, but now I'm seeing it as, this is amazing. Look at these waves. I get to ride the waves. And then I just went on about my snorkeling. Now that story was interesting. Didn't really become apparent to me what I was needing to learn from that story until more recently, because now I see it as the ocean is you, the deep, your being. Your life circumstances are the waves. Some days are calm and serene and we're just happy. We're just go lucky on those days. But it's really a matter of when you look at your life circumstances, you can view them in a different perspective and you will have a completely different experience. And that is the key to people grabbing hold of lifestyle changes for the long term and not using these life circumstances as an excuse to make the same choices, but see them as opportunities to connect to something deeper, right? They're presenting your life for a reason. Look at them just as that. These are pointers to something deeper. And if we allow ourselves to do that, we come out the other side a whole nother being. Now, it doesn't mean that maybe the chronic disease is still present, or maybe you still have cancer, maybe you still are going to die in a week. I don't know. But you will have a different perspective and you will be a different person. And so, yeah, that is the piece that I really I just need to allow it. But I'm really excited to share that type of message now with people versus like, go eat plants, go move your body, go sleep. They're like, oh, look, one more checklist thing for me to do. I want to present this in a different way so they can understand and turn inward. You know, there's nothing I can do. I just want to be a pointer for you because you know internally you have the wisdom within you to know exactly what to do. I can help you, like, you know, the nuanced decisions or whatever, but at the end of the day, we all know what to do. We just have to allow ourselves to do it.
Yeah, I love that. The story is fantastic, and so I relate to it so much. I had a very tough time in 2019, and because the surface circumstances were rocky, but so was my inner self. I was in victim mode, which always makes you, and I'm not knocking victims. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying when we are in a victim mode, we don't take accountability. That's for everyone. So, it's not just the people that we talked about from the documentary that didn't make the changes. This is like anybody, including me in that point. And so looking under the surface, it was like just as messy up. But it taught me a very valuable lesson. One of the things was hitting rock bottom and actually realizing that I can't go lower than this. Like death is after this, really. And actually being like, am I going to live like this because it's not life, or am I going to change that internal environment so that even when things are rocky outside it, when I look inside, I'm calm. And funny enough, lately, life has presented me with the same challenges of 2019, but I am in such a different space that I'm doing exactly what you did when you were snorkeling. Outside, it's waves and tempest and wind, you name it. And then I go in and it's like, I'm so peaceful that even if I have to make a hard choice that will change everything and those waves will get bigger, I'm okay. I can navigate because inside of me it's so calm. So you make great choices then.
Yeah. So what you're allowing is there's three things I think that's coming here, right? So one, you have just accepted these are the circumstances. You're not taking it personally. It's just how the universe has presented itself at this moment. You can get upset, we can complain, we can struggle, but it's a choice to do that. And it doesn't mean you accept it and don't do anything. But what you accept is these are the facts. This is the truth of this moment. Now you have a clear and calm spirit to look at these circumstances and go, okay, these are the waves. I can allow the waves to continue and be the way I am and know that I'm making this mindful choice, or I can take a mindful action. But the action that you take is not out of fear. It's not out of reaction. You're looking at this. And what's really going to be awesome is to see, because now you're making this from your heart. You're coming from a different inner calm space. You're not reacting. You're not causing fighting. Like, I will make this happen the way it should be. You're going to be walking through these circumstances, and I bet if I was to predict, they would dissolve much faster. You're going to have a wonderful opportunity once you go through the obstacle, and you'll be much stronger in a most amazing place, reflecting back. Because I think that's the other thing that you said, you kind of that victim mode. Like I said, I used to reflect back on my own childhood as, I was the victim of this and that and whatever, and hang on to it. It was interesting because part of my personality and my traits evolved out of that, trying to always prove that I was worthy of love and worthy of this and worthy, yada, yada, yada. But now what I see this is my past only has energy if I feed it, right? If I give attention to it, right? That's it, and it grows. So now what I tell patients and myself is, when those emotions come up, I accept that my emotions are responding, right? That's my human component of me. But I look at that and I go, interesting. I see you. What are you here to teach me? Because obviously you're here for a reason. So what can I learn from you? And then what happens is that emotion, that stress, that memory, it kind of dissolves. And what it leaves me is the imprint of the lesson that I need to take. And that's the beautiful thing about anything, right? If you look at it that way, when it's a struggle, you feel this intense emotion, or you feel yourself losing control and reacting, just stepping back out of the stream, the flux, let it go. And it'll reveal to you so much more. And it'll always point into that place of calm and peace. And what a wonderful way to live life, right? When you can step into whatever you choose, but you're making a choosing. You're choosing to, not reacting to. So we're allowing the being part to take over the human part, right?
I love that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So I think I definitely agree with this. I think knowing our why is so important so that we can make better choices, understanding our internal environment and changing that first so that the external doesn't affect us. And so going deeper into mindfulness, spirituality of our journey here and I know people have different spiritual beliefs, but it's not about religion. It's about knowing you are
Yes.
more than a body. Okay, so that's not
Right.
attached to any dogma. It's just you're a soul having this human experience. Is very
Yes.
limited if we think about it, but our soul is not limited. So tapping into
Mhm.
what maybe we learned even on past lives, if people believe into that, and really just remembering, and even if we, some people are like, oh, past lives don't exist. Okay, even if you don't believe into that, scientifically speaking, as you mentioned in the beginning, there are ancestral connections. So your
Mhm.
cells will remember things that you maybe consciously don't. So tap into that awareness and to that innate knowing that will
Mhm.
come to you anyway, just from the physicality of it and just from the genetic of it. And then try to make better choices, try to become a better version of yourself all the time. And so
Mhm.
I hope that people get that message and do it. But let's go back to like a little practical approach here because the first thing people ask is like, what the hell am I going to eat now? What do I have to eat to reverse to reverse diabetes? Because
Right,
we
right.
are also bombarded with the vegan thing, like everything you can have everything that you have on an omnivore diet, but it's vegan. And a
Mm.
lot of vegans are so unhealthy,
Mhm.
including having cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And it's like, okay, we need to definitely make sure that people understand it's not the same thing to just have a V on your package, and it's not
Mhm.
necessarily healthy. And you mentioned it before, the Popper's diet. We're actually going back to the basics, right? Whole grains, pulses, vegetables, fruit, like go to nature. But
Mhm.
if they had to understand this, and I also want your opinion on fats, for example,
Mhm.
there are some schools of thoughts around reversing diabetes that are very low fat or no fat whatsoever. You have Dr. Neil Barnard that is very much like oil is the devil, which is not wrong when it comes to like reversing disease. I'm like, why would you want to put something in your body that is just pure fat when you don't have to just go to the whole food? But he takes it sometimes to the extreme where actually even olives are like, don't have them. I guess it depends on who you're looking at. But then you have the other approach, the mastering diabetes
Mhm.
approach, which is you have basically a traffic lights approach. Like you have the green foods, the orange foods, and then the red foods to stay away from. And so there
Mhm.
are different kind of spectrums. And in mastering diabetes, the approach, for example, is to have you can have 15 grams of fat per day, which are unsaturated. So what is your stance if somebody wants to change their diet and they want to reverse either diabetes or pre-diabetes and become more sensitive to insulin? What would you suggest they do? And what is your stance on fats?
Okay. So I think we need to step back and first of all lay aside any dogmas about diet, right?
Mm,
So I think so many people, we go from identifying okay, they ate a standard American diet. Now they found their guru, they found their savior, they found their religion, and we have to preach, we have to eat this way. Okay. We have our ethical vegans, not wanting to cause harm to animals, which I'm totally on board with. I
mhm,
totally get it, but they're still making unhealthy processed food choices, right? So they've literally just replaced the standard American diet with the standard vegan, unhealthy, ultra processed diet, right? So they still deal with the consequences of poor food choices.
mm,
Um, so we can step aside, lay aside everything that you've heard and believe. I'm going to show you how I work with patients. Again, this is just how I found it works very well. I don't preach a particular way. I look at the person where you are right now.
mm,
So I see a person in front of me. I see a different person than I'll see in, tomorrow, like a different person, a different bodies. And, if we look at every human body that's in front of me at this point, is that's where we need to start, right? And so I do believe in a whole food plant-based diet. I eat a whole food plant-based diet. Now, does it mean that I don't go out and eat and there might be some oil and something? Sure. But I also know that I'm not going to feel as well. So I usually make different choices. So when
mhm,
I go out, I try to avoid certain things that I know that doesn't make me feel well. I know what bodies do well, right? I can look at your labs and say objectively, when you eat a whole food plant-based diet, you do better than you eat a standard American diet or even a diet that has animal products in it. I can tell
mhm,
you from your numbers, your body is telling us what it does. So this is
mhm,
very data driven as well. So when I look at someone and they're like, one, they have diabetes, they have chronic disease, they have high blood pressure, they have high cholesterol. I like, listen, you have less navigation space. We need to walk a little bit narrower path, but you need to eat a variety of plant foods. We don't need to be so restrictive, right? It's fruits, veggies, beans, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. This is where we need to go. Now, what I don't want you to do is be restricted to just one component. If we eat enough calories to sustain a healthy weight, and including making sure that we really bring most of our plate to legumes, lentils, and those whole grain, starchy veggies, because these are the calorie sustaining energy for you. I have seen more than a few times people come like they switched to a plant-based diet based on a few different gurus that they were doing. Maybe they're eating a pound of greens because they heard that's what they should do, or they should all eat only fruit, or they should only do this. They don't feel well, right? They don't have enough energy. They feel sick. They feel weak. They're like, well, if this is what a plant-based diet does, I'd rather just go back. At least my taste buds are happy and whatever, right? So that's unfortunate, right? So when we engage in patients, sometimes the ultra processed vegan foods are transition foods. Okay, let's move you at least into this direction. It helps open the door. Maybe they're trying to keep the door closed, but it helps us open their door and it opens their perspective, right? We have to go a little slower. Others jump all in, but build your plate around those fruits and veggies. Yes, but also mostly whole grains, beans, legumes. They have more protein, soy, all those amazing foods that will give you energy and all the nutrients. And you add in whole fat sources, nuts, seeds, avocados. Now, depending on the person, if they need to lose significant amount of weight, I may say half a cup or less of nuts and seeds based on the person, if they're male or female, their gender, how much weight they need to lose. I am not a fan of oil because it is liquid fat. There are obviously healthier oils than others. But what I have found is that there's no space typically for my patients who need to lose weight for liquid fat. It's very quickly absorbed and stored away for a rainy day that never comes.
Yeah.
And so that's how I choose to look at it. I'm not going to argue whether fats are healthy or not. Obviously, olive oil is better than lard. Okay. But at the end of the day, if someone who's healthy, meaning they don't have chronic disease or at a healthy weight, they want to use olive oil or avocado oil, go for it. That's fine. It's not going to cause you to, as long these people are already in a healthy mindset, they're not engaging in activities that cause them to gain weight and become ill. Allowing them to use olive oil within them, in as a dressing, or maybe sauteing something, whatever, that's fine. They're in a different state. But if I look at someone who's already ill, we have to pull out all the stoppers, and we're like, okay, we need a whole food plant-based diet, no oils, no ultra processed foods. You've kind of used up we all have yeah, we've kind of used our quota of making poor choices, and we're kind of limited right now, So we have to, see where we can backpedal as much as quickly as possible. We got to put the boat in reverse, so to speak. The train needs to reverse back into the station. And sometimes that requires a little bit more horsepower. And so the more we engage in a whole food plant-based diet, the more we can push back and start letting the body heal itself. So that's how I engage with patients. So don't feel afraid of that. Your nuts and seeds and avocados are not going to cause insulin resistance. They're not going to cause diabetes unless you're eating so much of them that you gain a significant amount of weight. Now, those in and of themselves will not cause your blood sugar to rise. I just haven't seen it. I haven't seen the data. I have had 1,000 patients on CGMs and looked at their blood sugars with them, with their food logs over and over and over again. At the end of the day, nuts and seeds and avocados are they've been proven in studies to be heart healthy. They're a good source of fats. We need a good source of fats. We need enough protein to make sure, because if you're eating these very calorically less, foods, less dense foods, they're typically less protein. People don't engage and eat those legumes and the soy products and the whole grains that have enough protein. I have absolutely seen patients who eat a very restrictive plant-based diet, not getting enough protein. They're smaller frame. They don't eat enough of those foods. They're struggling, and you will see things happen. And I'm like, hair loss, fatigue, sarcopenia, a variety of different things. We switch up and say, listen, I need you to be eating these foods, and they suddenly start feeling better. So it's really important that we don't become so restrictive and live in this religious my guru said this, my guru said that, you're right, you're wrong. It's like, we're doing the exact same thing as whatever. Like, no, 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 no. Here's our foods that the world gave us. Nature has provided us this wonderful, tasty menu. When humans start getting into the mix and trying to be the scientists and let's let Mother Nature do its thing, we get into trouble. So we step back, and that includes olive oil and avocado. These are still processed foods, right? They've removed everything but the fat. But but if you're well enough to do that, that's okay.
Yeah.
I choose not to do oil because one, I'm in this menopausal place. I never really liked fried foods anyway. They just didn't feel well. And I might have some salad dressings if I go somewhere that have a little oil in them, that's okay. But when it comes to fried foods, I just don't feel good. And I'd rather attune to a body that feels well. The aging process in and of itself is enough of a thing that the body has to go through. I'm not going to add to it, right?
Yeah.
So, that's how I help patients. And once they can divorce themselves from whatever beliefs they held, whereas this is the only way to do it, this is the only way to do the plant-based diet, and I have to have these results. And I'm like, give yourself the freedom and compassion and grace to make better, healthy choices. Things will shift, but I'm like, they cause more stress and anxiety by like, I must do it this way.
Yeah.
So like,
true.
And I was like, okay, really take a breath, step back, and let's just look at what would you like to eat, and then we'll make some decisions based on that. And so that's I found the easiest and best way.
I love that. And by the way, you look amazing. So the plant-based diet is definitely working. Aging is not a thing for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh my goodness.
So how can people work with you if they need and want a doctor that is more mindful? Because then the other thing is obviously not every doctor in the health space is educated about lifestyle medicine. So their their knowledge of diet is very limited to not many hours. But also they don't take the time to learn more. Some of them are still in the mindset that if you don't need animals, you don't have enough protein. And we know protein are important, especially as we get older, but you can get them from plants. So how can people reach out to you and work with you?
Yeah, thank you. They can just go to my website. It's drmarbas.com, Dr as in Mary, AR, B as in boy, AS.com. Everything's there. I'm on YouTube is one of my favorite places, Instagram, Facebook. So I'll speak a lot about plant-based and healthy stuff, but I speak a lot about mindfulness, and it's just a joy there. But yeah, there's all sorts of things. I have free stuff. I have the Healing Kitchen, which I run with Brittany Giroudi, who basically lost 70 pounds like 8 or 9 years ago. She's actually pregnant with her first baby due in May. But anyway, we meet live every Wednesday. She provides 2 recipes. We watch her make mouth-watering meals, and I answer medical questions. And then we run 2 workshops every month. We have an expert workshop. We've had Kim Campbell present, Brenda Davis, Dr. Joel Kahn, amazing other experts. And then I do a workshop every month and provide an ebook. And it's usually about something that people are struggling with. I've done osteoporosis, plant-based labs, insulin resistance, psychology of weight loss. This month I'm doing literally a plant-based 101 masterclass. Like everything I'm going to just pour into the 12 years of knowledge that I have on what you should be doing, and try to answer as many and all questions as I can, because it's just, I think it's a unique experience that I've had to share. So trying to put that in one place. And then I can also point them, like when I get all these questions, I'm like, here's an ebook, here you go, download the workshop. So those are always available. And anyone who signs up for the Healing Kitchen will have access to all past recordings as well.
Amazing. Fantastic. We'll put all the links in the show notes so people can go to them. I love that. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your work. I'm really enjoying your Instagram, actually. It started becoming buzzy at the end of last year. I'm like, oh, I love this. So thank you.
Thank you.
I love how you shifted, not shifted. You added
Awesome.
on, you grew. Because that's how it is. That's the growth, right? When like you have the basics and then you build on, build on, build on, and you have such a strong foundation. So we can go really, really high with it. I love it.
Thank you for having me. This has been fantastic.
My pleasure. Talk soon. Bye.
Excellent. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Marbas, and thank you everyone for staying on for this episode. I hope you got a lot out of it. It was so insightful and inspirational. And I can see that Dr. Marbas shares everything from the bottom of her heart. So everything is so authentic and kind, and I truly love her. She has a great energy, so I'm so happy she was on the show with us. If you want to learn more about her and how to work with her, I've put everything in the show notes for you. So let's get you all healthy, healthier, inspire you to make other people healthier. This should be like a ripple effect. So I'm always happy to hear from my listeners that maybe got inspired to even change the diet and lifestyle of their family through the episodes. So guys, keep on sharing them with me, as well as feedback to help me improve the program, the channel, so that I can really bring you the best guests and make sure that I share information you want to hear about. All right, until next time, thank you for listening. Bye.